Resistance bands are a tool that you can use in your home workouts to provide tension against the target muscle, allowing it to generate a stimulus that you will need for the body to want to grow muscle when you are at rest. Not only that, but it's probably one of the cheapest options you can look into. Even if you went with bodyweight options, you probably would still need other equipment that would still cost more than this. So being cheap and being something that can provide tension, it is an item that maybe you would like to look into for your home gym. And in many videos and articles that I've been looking at lately, it appears that tension seems to be the king when it comes to generating the stimulus you need for that muscle growth. So resistance band can do this. The one item I have covered in past videos is that it is a linear resistance curve versus one that fits most strength curves of your muscle. But regardless, as long as you are training hard enough into momentary muscle failure, maybe even 2 additional failure reps as I put in my other videos, you should still get that response for the muscle to want to build more when you are in your rest period between workouts. Now, when looking at the resistance bands, the more you stretch the band, the more tension you have. So when you are at a fully lengthened position with your muscles, most of the time the band is actually at the least stretched position. Now, the one good thing about this is you might be able to get through some sticking points. However, with the reduced tension, it might not be enough for your muscles to get again, stimulus or response from that tension to get stronger until you have stretched it far enough. So how I look at this is, yes, it does have linear variable resistance, which isn't perfect, but again, as long as you are training hard enough and getting to a point where you can't move it any longer, and maybe doing 1 to 2 extra like partial reps, or just holding it out for an additional 3 seconds or so, you should still get the stimulus you need. So with that, here are some tips and tricks I recommend when using resistance bands in order to get all of the tension and resistance out of them for the muscle to want to grow again during your rest between workouts. So first off, make sure that you are doing slow and controlled reps throughout the entire range of motion without losing tension in the band. You never want full slack in the bands at any time. You always want some tension throughout the entire range of motion. Now, of course, when starting the rep, you will be at the most slack part of the band. So as you stretch it more and more into, say, let's pretend we're doing a bicep curl. As you pull the band more and raise your hands up, you're going to feel more and more tension in your biceps. Now, you should receive the most tension when you are in the fully contracted position. This is actually where you are at a weaker point technically in the lift with your strength curve. But again, just keep doing the best you can in order to move through that range of motion with that exercise. Once you reach that fully contracted position, I like to hold it for a split second or so and then slowly change directions and go through what's called the eccentric or lengthening portion of the muscle. Basically, in a bicep curl, this is when you'd be lowering your hands back to the ground. Now remember, as you lower your hands back to the ground, always have some tension in the band. Never let it go fully slack. That way you're always having your muscles at least a little engaged throughout the entire time. And then what we're going to do is when we reach just before like a full slack or just before we fully lengthen our arms in this biceps curl, we will again slowly change direction and then stretch the band more as we raise our hands back up again. And you repeat that until you can't do any more reps, and then you get stuck. And then once you're stuck for 3 seconds or so, you can end the set. For me, I like to do one more little advanced thing when it comes to resistance bands. And after I get that into that stuck position and hold it for about 3 seconds, I will then, if we're in the bicep curl, lower it again. But I'll actually do what's called 2 partial reps. I did make a quick video on this one. But basically, I'll do another rep, but it won't be all the way through the range of motion as I'm curling. I'll try and get as far as I can. It'll stop, go back down, then do another partial rep. I shouldn't get through that range of motion again. And then from there, I would end my set once I failed out of that second partial rep. Now, the reason I do this is to make sure that I just get enough tension in those lengthened positions. You don't really have to do this. I just try and do it to make sure I'm actually providing enough of a stimulus with the resistance bands to get that stimulus for muscle growth. And now for me, I like to do between 5 and 10 reps as my sets. Feel free to do whatever you want between something like 5 and 30, but I found that I can get great results within 5 to 10 as long as I'm using the proper bands for each exercise. Now for total number of sets, I personally like to do 2 or 3. Now with resistance bands, it has been usually 3 for me, as I feel like that's where I'm actually reaching that fatigue point. You could actually do it in 1. If you just went all out and you basically ended that set feeling like you could not do another set at all, that would be where you'd end your workout, or at least the exercise for that workout. But personally, if you're working out alone, you probably need at least 2, and then I like to say an optional 3. But just make sure you have to be training hard enough, at least within, I'd say 0 to 2 reps of failure. But with bands, you can probably go all the way to failure and be just fine. Just make sure that you're doing it in a safe manner. And lastly, when it comes to actual rep speed or rep tempo, I recommend something like a 6-second rep or a 3-second up and 3-second down. So you can count it out as like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That even might be a little fast, but something like that just to make sure you're keeping on target and making sure each rep is about the same. As you start to fail out, your reps probably will slow down a little bit. That's perfectly fine, but just go as long as you can with a solid, controlled 6 or so rep speed for your exercise. All right, now when we're going between workout to workout, your goal is to use progressive overload. So one thing I really like about progressive overload is maybe you start out with bands and you just picked a weight that's way too light. The next workout you do, move it up. Pick a heavier, stronger band in this case, or even combine bands to make sure there's more tension when you're doing the exercise. Over time, as you keep doing progressive overload, if you feel they're too light, eventually you will reach a point where it's actually challenging for you. If you're really, really strong, maybe you need to get a whole another set of bands, combine it with what you have. But do know that eventually you would get to a point where you are working with the resistance that you should be. This is the same with dumbbells, body weight, all that stuff. But I see this question a lot, like what resistance or what weight should I start out with? Kind of just pick one, learn the form, and as you feel like it's too light, add a bit more each time until you find a weight where it's actually working and making you struggle through your normal sets. Now, there may become a time where doing the whole adding more reps and then the resistance is a bad idea. You could get stuck where you're just unable to do like any more reps ever, so you just can't do any more reps. Now, even in this case, you probably would still be building muscle, but it's hard to be mentally in your workouts if you're not seeing progression. So the best we could do is probably just try and add another small band in there, allowing you to add a bit more tension throughout. And then as you add more tension, you might be able to then do more reps as you go along if you take it off. So you might, in the future, when you get really, really strong, want to try and add a bit more tension instead of reps. But ultimately, if we want to keep things easy, I like the doing reps more, or adding more and more reps before adding on resistance, and then keep going in that method. And then lastly, you have to be consistent. Again, this is going to take, I'd say, at least 6 months to a year to see really any results, probably a year to see good results. People think things come way too fast. You have to be a very lucky genetic person to just start out and see results right away, even if you're doing everything perfectly correct. Most people will get average results with average genetics. That's just how it is. So just do your best for the body that you have and see if you can get the results. As long as you are focusing on the target muscle and providing it with enough tension and fatiguing it far enough to get the stimulus to build muscle, then adding protein, rest, hydration, all the other stuff, you will see results in time. But ultimately, how you look and the results that you get will come down to the genetics that you have. But again, it will probably take at least a year to see results. So I always say 6 months to a year is where you'll start seeing things. Probably around 2 to 3 year mark is where you might reach your actual potential. And then from there, it's tiny, tiny, tiny gains after that. All right, so I covered quite a bit in this video, so I want to do a quick recap of some of the tips that I think you should look into. So first off, make sure that once you reach failure, I'm going to stretch the bands, that you do those 2 additional partial reps. Kind of an advanced technique, but something I found works really well, at least with bands. After that, keep the rep speed slow. Again, I kind of recommend a 6-second or 3-second up, 3-second down, with continuous tension throughout in the bands. Never let it go into a fully slack state. Also, I recommend 2 to 3 sets. You could do it in 1 if you really, really, really pushed it. But again, working out alone, you're probably not going to. So I recommend at least doing 2 with an optional 3rd set. Also, make sure that you are focused on progressive overload between each one of your workouts. So you should always be trying to do at least 1 more rep in the next workout that you do of that exercise. And then over time, you probably want to be adding on more resistance as well as you reach the max number of the range for reps you want in each one of your sets. And of course, once you reach the max amount of reps you want per set, add that resistance and keep going to get stronger and stronger over time. So with that, I'm going to throw a video that goes over some of the equipment I have for my resistance bands home gym if you want to take a look at my setup. And also make sure you head over to GamerBody.com. That is where you can get the free program that you can download and do the entire workout from the comfort of home.